Donuts for a change. Why don't you just take out your gun and shoot him? Makes too much noise. Come on, you can have one. A donut once in a while will not kill you. I'm a doctor. I can't. I just found out my talking scale has been lying to me. Remember Empty Nest? Saturday nights on NBC. Dr. Harry Weston trying to hold his household together. Carol in full chaos mode. Barbara doing whatever Barbara wanted. Dreyfuss basically in charge, and Charlie wandering in like locks were just a fun design. Empty Nest hit NBC in 1988, spun out of the Golden Girls universe, and ran for 7 seasons and 170 episodes. For its first 3 seasons, it sat comfortably in the top 10, which tells you it was doing a lot more than just filling time. And once you look past the cozy sitcom surface, this show gets a lot weirder than you remember. We're talking a failed backdoor pilot, cast shakeups, behind-the-scenes clashes, and dog swaps. Stick around for number 1 because it brings the whole series full circle in the most fitting way possible. Before we jump in, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend who believes Dreyfuss was the best actor on that set. Now, let's get into the countdown. Number 10, they blew up the whole show and kept the house. Empty Nest failed, got rebuilt from the studs, and came back to life like nothing happened. Only most people don't remember that part. Here's what actually went down. In May 1987, the Season 2 Golden Girls finale tried to launch a spin-off by introducing the Corliss family. These were neighbors nobody had ever heard of, who suddenly became the main characters of what was supposed to be a brand new sitcom. George and Renee Carras, played by Paul Dooley and Rita Moreno, were dealing with empty nest syndrome after their daughter left for college. There was also Renee's brother, Chuck, played by Jeffrey Lewis, and their noisy neighbor, Oliver, played by David Leisure, rounding out what was supposed to be the new sitcom family. No Weston, no Dreyfuss. America took one look and, collectively, said they hated this. Even the cast knew it was a disaster. Rita Moreno, who had won an Oscar, an Emmy, a Grammy, and a Tony, later called it a very, very bad show. When an EGOT winner says the show is bad, that is not a good sign. What happened was that Susan Harris, the head writer, got frightfully ill during that 1 week they were putting the pilot together and could not do rewrites. And it really, really, really needed rewrites badly. The production was such chaos that by the time they started filming, the script had been rewritten so many times that Moreno could not even remember her first line. Think about that. Rita Moreno, a seasoned professional who had worked with everyone from Elvis to Spielberg, was stumbling through her dialogue because nobody could decide what this show was supposed to be. Every day, they kept changing her character to the extent that by the time they got to perform it in front of an audience, she could not remember line 1 because the attitudes had changed so many times. Worse, the chemistry between Dooley and Moreno was non-existent, and everyone could tell. The Golden Girls themselves looked uncomfortable with the whole thing. But here is where it gets interesting. NBC did not completely give up. They took the basic concept, scrapped everything else, and in 1988 launched Empty Nest with Richard Mulligan, Dina Manoff, and Christy McNichol. They kept David Leisure, but completely rewrote his character as Charlie, an annoying cruise ship worker. Same chaos energy, new name, fresh start, like he was in sitcom witness protection. They kept the house too, just handed it over to the Westons like nothing awkward had ever happened there before. The lesson here is that sometimes the idea is not wrong, but the execution is so spectacularly bad that you have to blow everything up and start over. Number 9. NBC's Saturday Night Secret Weapon. By the early 90s, Empty Nest had become part of a full-blown little TV ecosystem, and one of the biggest flexes came with Hurricane Saturday. On November 9, 1991, NBC sent the same storm through all 3 connected sitcoms in a single night. In the Golden Girls two-parter, the ladies hunkered down as it rolled in. Then over on Empty Nest, the Westons dealt with their own hurricane drama in an episode called Windy. And over on Nurses, the hospital staff handled all the storm's casualties with both Rose Nyland and Laverne Todd making appearances along the way. Same storm, same props, same weather machines, 3 different casts, and 1 very long night for the production crew. It was essentially channel surfing where the hurricane followed you everywhere you went. This was one of those crossover gimmicks that actually sounded cool instead of desperate, turning NBC's Saturday lineup into one big shared universe event before TV executives ever started using phrases like cinematic universe to justify everything. It worked because all three shows were genuinely connected. Same city, same universe, same creator. And NBC had spent years building that Saturday block into something audiences actually cared about. For a stretch in the early 90s, Saturday nights on NBC were basically wall-to-wall Miami sitcom territory. Empty Nest was part of that world, a staple that helped define the night for years. Hey, did you guys hear the news about the hurricane? It's going to hit in an hour, which is kind of wild when you think about where this whole franchise started. Number 8. It borrowed its bones from a British sitcom. Long before Empty Nest became part of NBC's Miami sitcom empire, its basic setup had already been done with a British accent and probably a lot more tea. The show's concept was loosely inspired by the UK's sitcom Father Dear Father, which ran from 1968 to 1973 and followed Patrick Glover, a divorced father raising two daughters while sharing the house with an enormous St. Bernard named H.G., as in H.G. Wells. Now, to be clear, Empty Nest did not copy it beat for beat. Harry Weston was a widowed pediatrician in Miami, not a British novelist in Hampstead, and his daughters were adults with enough baggage to fill Dreyfuss' dog bed twice over. But the skeleton of the idea is close enough to make you do a double take. One father, two daughters, one oversized dog, and a household built entirely around generational chaos. So if Empty Nest ever felt a little older than some of the other late 80s sitcoms around it, that may be exactly why. Underneath the NBC polish, the wisecracks, and all that Miami crossover energy, there was a British sitcom blueprint hiding in plain sight the whole time. Number 7. B. Arthur versus the Gum. B. Arthur had a few famously hard lines, and apparently one of them was chewing gum. It was Park Overall who told the story publicly, and Dina Manoff backed her up on record, so this one has receipts from two different cast members. The short version is that B. Arthur had a well-known set-wide no-gum policy, and she enforced it without exception. David Leisure said she had a radar that extended about 100 feet, and she would walk straight over to you and make you spit it out on the spot. Dina Manoff, however, decided to personally test that policy not once but twice. The first time was during a Golden Girls crossover, where Dina showed up to the set chewing gum. She had heard about the gum rule and wanted to see if it was real. It was absolutely real. B told her to spit it out, and Dina obliged. Round 1 went to B. But then B came over to the Empty Nest set for a guest appearance, and Dina had a piece of gum in her mouth again. B told her to spit it out, same as before. This time Dina smiled and said no, because this was her set. B stormed off. And the thing is, Dina has made it clear this was not some accidental run-in. She did it on purpose both times, which makes this less of a diva story and more of a long-running two-act bit that played out across two different sets over the course of an entire sitcom universe. A sitcom grudge match fought entirely with chewing gum. Number 6. Why Barbara Really Left. Kristy McNichol, who played Barbara, left Empty Nest midway through its run, and the reason was serious, though she kept it completely private at the time. So viewers just saw Barbara disappear, and a previously off-screen third sister named Emily suddenly stepped into the family picture. Lisa Reel joined the cast in 1992 to play Emily Weston, the other daughter who had supposedly been away at college this whole time. Viewers were not amused. Reel herself admitted the situation was weird, and David Leisure later described it as the impossible job. Emily lasted just 13 episodes before the show quietly sent her back to college and moved on entirely. Years later, McNichol revealed that the reason for her departure was bipolar disorder. She did return for the 1995 series finale, and that episode stands as her last on-screen acting performance. She did some voice work after that, lending her voice to the animated series Extreme Ghostbusters in 1997 and Invasion America in 1998, but she never appeared on camera again and officially retired from acting in 2001. So Barbara's exit was not about contract drama or a storyline shakeup. It was Kristy McNichol stepping away for her mental health, and in hindsight, that makes her brief return at the very end feel a lot more meaningful than it might have seemed at the time. Number 5. The guest star bench was absolutely stacked. For a show people really do not talk about anymore, Empty Nest had a surprisingly ridiculous guest star lineup. We are talking Phil Hartman, Matthew Perry, Joey Lawrence, Garth Brooks, Jane Lynch, and Mayim Bialik, all passing through Community Medical Center like this was perfectly normal. Future household names quietly collected by a cozy family sitcom about a widowed pediatrician and his giant dog. That gives the show one of those great retro TV qualities where you are watching an old episode and suddenly blurting out, "Wait, is that before the opening scene is even over?" When these people showed up on Empty Nest, most of them were not yet the version of themselves that the world would come to know. They were just talented faces on the way to bigger pop culture immortality. Mayim Bialik is the perfect example. She appeared in 2 episodes as a patient named Lori Kincaid, years before Blossom and years before The Big Bang Theory. And here is the kicker. Both Empty Nest and Blossom were with Thomas Harris Productions, and Bialik herself later said that those Empty Nest appearances were essentially her audition for Blossom. That little guest spot was quietly a screen test the entire time. Empty Nest's guestbook ended up looking a lot fancier in hindsight than anyone realized while it was actually happening. Number 4. Dreyfuss was really a 3-dog operation. Every great sitcom family needs a scene stealer, and on Empty Nest, that honor belonged to Dreyfuss, the giant lovable dog who somehow managed to look smarter than half the humans in the room. The dog most viewers knew as Dreyfuss was played primarily by Bear, a St. Bernard Golden Retriever mix. So yes, that big shaggy face was completely real, and yes, he looked exactly like the kind of dog who would take over your couch, your schedule, and eventually your entire emotional well-being. But Bear was not doing it alone. His brother Julio often doubled for him in more energetic scenes because Julio was the higher action dog. In other words, when Dreyfuss needed to do more than just stand there looking adorable and mildly judgmental, Julio was the one stepping in to handle business. And here is the fun little detail that makes this even better. Julio is actually the dog seen running around Richard Mulligan in the opening credits of the early seasons. So, if you remember Harry Weston getting yanked around by Dreyfuss in that intro, you were mostly watching the stunt brother and not the main dog actor. The truth is Dreyfuss was not one single K9 star. He was basically a furry tag team. Bear handled the main role, Julio handled the action, and in later seasons Bear's son Bingo joined the operation too. Together, they pulled off one of the most memorable sitcom dogs of the entire era, which honestly is more than most human guest stars ever managed. Number 3. Joey Zuzu helped him survive the reboot. When Empty Nest was rebuilt after that disastrous Golden Girls pilot, one actor made it through the demolition, and that was David Leisure. And that was not an accident. By the time the retooled series launched in 1988, Leisure was already nationally recognizable as Joey Zuzu, the smirking commercial liar who sold cars with the confidence of a man who thought shame was completely optional. That character had made him a genuine pop culture presence, and NBC knew it. According to multiple sources, including the show's own history, Empty Nest was conceived in part as a star vehicle for Leisure specifically because Joey Zuzu had already made him a household name. In other words, Charlie Dietz may have been born in sitcom land, but Joey Zuzu got him in the door, and the timing worked out pretty well for everybody involved. Leisure brought instant recognition to a brand new show that was still finding its footing, and Empty Nest gave Joey Zuzu somewhere meaningful to go once the car commercials wound down. By the time the ads stopped running, Charlie Dietz had already taken over completely. Same guy, same smirk, just a different set of lies. Number 2, Susan Harris basically recast her own family tree. Richard Mulligan and Dina Manoff were not strangers when they showed up on Empty Nest together. They had already worked together for Susan Harris before on her earlier show Soap. And what they had been to each other on that show is where it gets genuinely fun. On Soap, Mulligan played Burt Campbell, while Manoff played Elle Lewitz, the spoiled mob boss's daughter who married Burt's stepson Danny. In other words, they were not father and daughter at all on that show. They were stepfather-in-law and daughter-in-law, which is exactly the kind of detail that makes Soap the beautiful disaster it truly was. So Susan Harris basically took 2 actors from one family circus, moved them into a brand new sitcom, and reassigned their entire relationship like she was reorganizing the seating chart at Thanksgiving dinner. Number 1. NBC's Saturday Night Secret Weapon worked because the whole block was built to last. What made all of this possible, the crossovers, the spin-offs, the shared storms, and shared hallways, was the fact that NBC had spent years turning Saturday night into something people genuinely planned their evenings around. Empty Nest was not just a show that happened to air on Saturdays. It was a load-bearing wall in a programming block that defined an era of television. From the Golden Girls to Nurses to Empty Nest itself, the whole ecosystem was connected by the same creator, the same city, and the same commitment to keeping audiences on the couch from 8 o'clock until they ran out of reasons to stay up. And when you look at everything Empty Nest pulled off, surviving a disastrous pilot, reinventing itself from scratch, launching a spin-off, hosting a hurricane, stacking a guest list that reads like a Hollywood future Hall of Fame, and doing it all from a house in Miami with a very large dog, it is hard not to feel like this show deserved a little more credit than history ended up giving it.